guys, it's Emily, the controversial mom, back for yet another controversial topic. I want to talk to you today about something that's going to blow your mind because you're going to laugh when I tell you this topic, but I promise you it is one of the most controversial things in our society today. And yes, I am saying that above transgender nonsense, men and women's sports, men and women's bathrooms, men can have babies, all that. There is something much more controversial out there, and that is your public library. You're laughing right now, and you probably should, because who in the world ever thought that public libraries would be so controversial? Yet they are. And I can tell you they are because I got 2 emails yesterday asking for interviews with local media outlets about the very controversial book replacement policy going on in the Huntsville-Madison Library. So I want to do some background story on how we got to where we are. I've been dealing with this library issue for, I'm going to say 2-ish years, maybe not quite that long, but gosh, it feels so much like it. I first found out about the public library situation when all of this nonsense started happening in Prattville, Alabama with Cleanup Alabama. I kept hearing about it in the news that they were dealing with these very graphic books in the library, and I honestly didn't think twice about it for 2 main reasons. One, I have never been an avid reader up until the past couple of years. I certainly was not a big user of the public library. Now that I read a lot, I personally just like to buy my own books because, one, I have to have a hardback book. This flimsy, soft, I can't do. I had to have a hardback book. I also highlight in all of my books, and I also make notes in my books. So taking a book from the public library just isn't cutting it for me. So I've never been a big user of that. 2, the public library has just never been a big space for me because I didn't read. I grew up in a very rural area. It was never just a place that we went because it just wasn't convenient. So I didn't think twice about any of this when it first came up. And I didn't realize what was actually happening in the libraries. As I started learning more about what it was, I started realizing how this is actually a huge issue in our community that needed to be dealt with. So it slowly became an issue for Moms for Liberty, where we got involved really in Limestone County and then in Madison County. And then we've just kind of been helping all across the state where we can. We also had this big thing with Kirk Cameron in our library here in Madison a couple years ago. Unrelated to all the content that we were finding in the library, we were working with Brave Books to host something called See You at the Library. And it was a nationwide movement hosted by Brave Books where they were just doing kid-friendly, truly kid-friendly, faith-based story hours at public libraries. We just decided to host one because they were asking for people all across the country to do it. So we were truly planning on a very small event, didn't expect anything major out of it. I had never been to a story hour up until that time, so I had no idea what to expect. But lo and behold, Kirk Cameron ends up being a guest at our event, which, as you can imagine, drew tons of attention. So the short version of the story is the public library decided that because Kirk was going to be at our event and Riley Gaines, that it was too much of a risk to the community because of protesters, and they canceled our event. Well, they attempted to cancel our event. They clearly did not know who they were dealing with. As one of the most defiant human beings in the world, they tried to tell me that our event was canceled, and I, along with Brave Books, said, no, we're having our event, and if you don't allow us to have our event, we will sue you based on constitutional free speech, and we will be there. So eventually the library caved, and we had our event, and it was great and wonderful and all the things. So all of that really pulled me into this whole thing with public libraries. Then I started looking at the content in the libraries and was blown away by what I found. So I have 2 examples that I'm going to talk about today, because you can't have this discussion about the public library without fully understanding what we're talking about. It's one thing to say we're dealing with sexually explicit books. It's another to have a book in front of someone to show them full depictions of what we're talking about. It's one thing to say it's a graphic book. It's another thing to tell them what these books actually say. So I want to give you a little bit more context because I think that's the only way for people to really understand the gravity of this situation with our public libraries. I spoke to a group, it was probably about this time last year, and I took a stack of books in to the meeting because I wanted people to be able to see. And there was this older guy there. Like, it was just so funny. I was talking about one of these books called It's Perfectly Normal. And I was telling them, because they meet in a church, so I didn't want to show them pictures of the book, but I was telling them what was in the book, and his jaw dropped. Like, he could not believe what we were talking about. And I, of course, I'm not going to filter what's happening in these books, because when we filter it, we don't get the full picture across to people of what we're dealing with. So I try to be as accurate as the books are. So when they're talking about masturbation and blowjobs, that's the words I use, because that's what's in the books. We shouldn't be filtering it because it's uncomfortable if it's books we're putting in front of children. We need to use the same context. So it was a very uncomfortable meeting for the people in the audience, because those are not normal conversations to have in public like that. And yet here I am spewing them, just like I'm saying, it's a Wednesday night, like no big deal. So I kind of do it for effect, but also to get the point across that this is the stuff we're dealing with in our public libraries. And this is why people need to wake up, get engaged, and fight back on this. So my 2 examples. The first one is this book called All Boys Aren't Blue. It is a memoir book. I will say this is the most challenged books in the country, because this book, and it's not, there's, when you look at it, sorry, I've got a glare on my thing. It's not that bad of a book when you look at it. The cover of it's not bad. There's nothing on here, if you as a parent saw it, would be alarmed. But like I said, it's the most challenged book in the country, because it is a memoir, so true stories, about this young author, George Johnson, and basically like the struggles he's gone through as a child all the way up to adulthood, where he kind of grows into the person he is today, being a very openly homosexual man. Now, the issue with this book is not that he is gay. It's not that he is black. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that this book was until recently shelved in the juvenile section of the library. Juvenile is a little misleading. I hate the labels they put on these age categories, because you don't fully understand what they're talking about. But it's not juvenile, sorry. It's a preteen book. Sorry, I'm trying to get my words right. The book is in the section for 12 to 17-year-olds. So a 12-year-old can get this book and read it. Now, the reason this book is so bad for a 12-year-old, keep in mind 12-year-olds are like 7th grade-ish. The first really graphic, horrible story, and it's probably the most egregious one in here, is about the author when he was, I think it's 10-ish. I can't remember. It's been so long since I've read the details in the book. But he was raped by a cousin, a male cousin. So you're talking incest, you're talking rape, you're talking pedophilia. That's one of the first big stories in this book. And he recognizes that it's wrong, but it's a cousin, and he kind of enjoys it, so he doesn't know what to do. That's pretty heavy for a child as young as 12 to be reading. They're still, they're getting into the puberty stage and trying to figure everything out. So to be exposed to something that graphic is pretty heavy. And then there's the whole section in the back, and I can't find it to read excerpts from it, but the chapter is titled Losing My Virginity Twice. Now, it's called Losing My Virginity Twice because this is a homosexual relationship that he's in, and it's his first consensual sexual relationship with what I presume is his boyfriend, even though I don't think he technically calls him that. But it's twice because once is when he's in a dominant position, and second is when he's in a submissive position. I am not going to go into graphic detail of what that means, although the book does. I'm not going to talk about it on here because I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be able to post the content because it would be that disgusting. I'm pretty sure there's regulations around that. I can't talk about it, but this book is on the shelf for a 12-year-old to read. That is why this book is one of the most, if not the most, contested books in the country. This, for anyone that watches Joyanne Reid, not that y'all would watch her, but this is the book that Tiffany Justice, the co-founder of Moms for Liberty, talked about on air with Joy Reid. That Joyanne Reid defended this book, saying that children need access to it. For those that have been traumatized, this book they would see themselves in. That's who that crazy woman is. She wants to normalize that kind of book. All right, the next book is called It's Perfectly Normal. This book is in the juvenile section. So I think I said it wrong a minute ago. All Boys Aren't Blue is young adult preteen. It's Perfectly Normal is the juvenile section. So to put that in context for you, that is children as young as 7 up to like 11. The categories kind of differ from place to place. So it's 7-ish to 11-ish. This book is so graphic, I cannot show you pictures because they're that bad. But I am going to talk about several of the sections in this book because they're worth noting. Keep in mind, this is for a 7-year-old. The first picture that I was going to talk about, well, I guess I could show this one. This is just different lifestyles, being lesbian, bisexual, trans, whatever. I don't think a 7-year-old really needs to understand what a lesbian is. It just leads into these whole things about sexual orientation, sexual preferences. 7-year-olds don't need to know about sex. We don't need to normalize that conversation for 7-year-olds. It's just not appropriate. The other page I can't show you because it's full frontal nudity of boys and girls. Yes, boys and girls and men and women. So I'm just going to describe to you what's on these pages because I can't show them to you. On both boy and girls, you've got the boys at the bottom, the girls at the top. The young babies, they look to be 2, fully naked, full frontal. Then you've got what appears to be like a 10-ish-year-old girl and boy. Then you've got kind of the pre-teenish kind of puberty age, all the way up to old grandma and grandpa with all their sagging parts. I hope y'all enjoyed that part. You've got disabled people, you've got overweight people. All of them full frontal nudity. All of it. Then you've got female genitalia. Literally, it's called sex organs. And it has a young preteen girl bent over with a mirror exploring her body. Let me tell you the first thing I thought of when I saw this picture. When I was in college, we used to watch Sex and the City all the time. I had a girlfriend that she loved Sex and the City. She bought all the DVDs and we would watch them on repeat. There is an episode in Sex and the City where one of the characters is encouraged to get a mirror and go look at herself because she'd never done it before, blah, blah, blah. It was a whole show about this. That was Sex and the City with 20-year-old girls watching. We've now taken that episode and we've put it in a book for 7-year-olds to look at. That's how disgusting this book is. Then you've got the same thing for males, full frontal nudity, fully erect, in front of a mirror, checking himself out. Then you keep going through the book. There's one about the birds and the bees. There's nothing hidden in this discussion. Whole section on masturbation and why it's perfectly normal. So we're encouraging self-gratification. You keep going through here at the back. There's a whole thing that talks about STDs. Yeah, if you're sexually active, you should definitely be healthy and you should be getting checked and all those things. At 7 years old, we don't need to be encouraging children to, one, even understand what sex is, much less an STD or how to treat it. Then there's the whole section about gender neutrality, gender fluidity. I struggle to say that word. The bathroom issues where we should just be able to go into whichever bathroom we want. You've got all the gender identity stuff. Then you've got my favorite, laws and rulings, where we talk about abortion. For 7-year-olds, we're introducing a section. And look, it's not pictures. This is full text. Like at 7 years old, kids are trying to learn to read. And they've got whole sections in here about murdering babies in the womb. That's not age appropriate at all. I will say this book is very accurate. There is nothing in here that I read or looked at and was like, oh, you're just trying to make things sound better than they are. It's not. It's very factual, very accurate. It's a really good sex ed book for high school. not casual reading for a 7-year-old. So these are two examples of the crazy stuff we have going on in our public libraries. There are several other books that I don't have. They've thankfully been moved to the adult section, which still gross that we have them, but at least now adults have to be involved in accessing these books. And it's books like Sex Plus, T is for Trans. There's a couple other ones that have sex in the title of it. And it's truly about sexual activity, like masturbation, just being sexually active, whatever it may be. It talks about contraceptives, abortion, like all the things. Like they're very, very, very graphic. It truly leaves nothing to the imagination. So these are the books that we've been dealing with for the past year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, trying to get this stuff out of our libraries, or at a minimum, just move to the adult section so kids don't stumble upon these books, but a parent has to be involved in accessing the book, and then, of course, having the discussion with the child based on their family values and what's appropriate for the child. I'm going to talk to my child about certain aspects differently than others, and that's fine. That's a parent right to do that, but we can only exercise that right if we're able to ensure parents are involved in the conversations. So that is the hot topic that is our public libraries, and this is why they're so controversial, is because of content like this. Now, thankfully, Alabama's moving in a good direction, and we have passed library codes that force these books into the adult section, whereas before they were not. But now libraries have to relocate this stuff into the adult section or they lose state funding, which is good. We're just forcing libraries to be responsible and ensure that parents are involved in those conversations. So I hope that this was helpful in helping you to understand the controversy surrounding our public libraries and why it's not just this simple, well, we want to get rid of LGBT content. It really has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the graphic nature of what's being presented. So it is a lot of information. It seems to be heading in a good direction, and for that we are very grateful, but we will continue to fight. There are still pieces of legislation that need to be passed here in Alabama that we've got to keep fighting. So we will continue to do that. So I'm sure the libraries will continue to remain in the headlines throughout the next year as we fight to get that legislation passed and hopefully implemented. So I hope that this was helpful to you. If you have questions on any of this, by all means, please let me know. I can talk about it for days because I've been dealing with it for so long. But until then, y'all have a good one.